Hey everybody, it's Silvershroom and welcome back to the Blender Solar System. Last time we started taking a look at dwarf planets, starting with Ceres, and now we're moving on to probably the most well-known dwarf planet, and that is Pluto. Now, Pluto is a dwarf planet orbiting in the Kuiper belt, a ring of icy bodies beyond Neptune. It is the largest dwarf planet in the solar system, but only the second most massive. By extension, it is also the largest known object orbiting beyond Neptune, and the largest non-planet in the solar system directly orbiting the Sun. There are 7 moons that are larger than it. We'll get into that soon. Anyway, Pluto was discovered on February 18, 1930 by American astronomer Clyde Tombaugh. Of their recovery photos, basically photos that showed Pluto, but it wasn't recognized in any of them until later, they date back to August 20th, 1909. Now, the search for Pluto began when American astronomer Percival Lowell predicted the existence of a 9th planet orbiting beyond Neptune based on discrepancies in Neptune's orbit. And Clyde Tombaugh, who was part of the team to find this mysterious new planet, managed to discover Pluto from around Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. Now, Pluto was initially considered the 9th planet. In naming, there were several other names. Percival Lowell's widower, he had died before Pluto was discovered, his widow, Constance Lowell, suggested Zeus, Percival, and Constance. Yeah, none of those were considered. The credit for naming Pluto goes to Venetia Burney, an Englishwoman who was 11 at the time. She suggested the name Pluto after the Roman god of the underworld, known to the Greeks as Hades, believed to her grandfather at the dinner table, and that reached his colleagues in the United States. And the final vote was between Pluto, Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom, which was already the name of the asteroid, and Cronus, the Greek equivalent of Saturn, which was proposed by Thomas Jefferson Jackson C., who was a rather unpopular astronomer. Anyway, Pluto received every vote. However, as time passed, astronomers refined Pluto's size to be much smaller than the planet beyond Neptune was initially believed to be. Ultimately, it was discovered that the discrepancies in Neptune's orbit were due to an overestimation of Neptune's mass, essentially disproving the existence of Planet 9, at least as how Percival Lowell defined it. And, starting in 1992, more objects were discovered orbiting in the same area as Pluto. Essentially the same song and dance as with Ceres. And as these objects started getting larger and larger, Pluto's status as a planet was questioned. Eventually, in 2006, the International Astronomical Union came up with their definition for a planet: orbit the Sun, hydrostatic equilibrium, and clear the orbit of debris. Pluto does not meet that third criterion and was reclassified as a dwarf planet. Not a lot of people agreed with this. To this day, you'll still hear people saying Pluto will always be a planet to me, and people disagree with the definition, saying it's too arbitrary and too vague, because I don't believe any planet has its orbit completely cleared, but I do think it is significant that for the planets, the objects in their orbit are all in orbital resonance with them. Basically, they dominate their orbits, but Pluto does not. It is only a very small percent of the mass in its orbit, while other planets like Earth and Jupiter are many times the mass of everything else in their orbits. So anyway, with its reclassification, Pluto gained the minor planet designation 134,340. If it was included on its discovery, it likely would have been number 1,164. So, looking at Pluto more closely, it has a diameter of just about 2,400 kilometers. That's only 1/5 of Earth's diameter, but over twice the diameter of Ceres. And as I've shown here, Pluto does actually have a very thin atmosphere. However, due to its distance from the Sun, it is believed that when it gets particularly far, parts of the atmosphere may actually freeze and fall like snow. Now, Pluto rotates once in about 6 days and 9 hours. And similar to Uranus, Pluto has an extreme axial tilt. It is tilted at just over 120 degrees, and as such, has extreme seasons. But unlike most small bodies in the solar system, Pluto has a system of multiple moons. So, the Plutonian system contains 5 moons: Charon, Styx, Nix, Kerberos, and Hydra. Probably the most notable of these is Charon. Now, Charon was discovered on June 22nd, 1978 by American astronomer James W. Christie. Now, the name Charon is actually derived from the name of Christie's wife, Charlene, which, of course, didn't go with the traditional mythological names. So, some other astronomers proposed the name Persephone for it, who was Hades' wife and niece. But Christie stuck with Charon after he discovered that it is coincidentally also the name of the ferryman of the underworld. However, his name is actually pronounced Charon. Charon, Karen, take your pick. Now, compared to Pluto, Charon is particularly large. It has a diameter of about 1,200 kilometers, which is for just over half of Pluto's diameter. Its diameter, or mass, is also only 1/8 that of Pluto's, and because of this closeness in mass, Pluto and Charon actually orbit each other, and are often considered a double dwarf planet. The barycenter, center of mass of Plutonian system, is pretty far outside of Pluto, so yeah, Charon doesn't really orbit Pluto at all. So Charon orbits around 17,200 kilometers from this center of mass, or about 19,600 kilometers from Pluto. Now, its orbital period is the same as Pluto's rotation period, about 6.4 days. And it is tidally locked to Pluto. However, unlike most moons in the solar system, the tidal locking is mutual. Pluto and Charon always show the same face to each other, with Pluto's heart-like region, Tombaugh Regio, after its discoverer, always facing away from Charon. And Charon also has this dark spot on its north pole, informally named Mordor. It should also be noted that unlike Uranus, whose north pole is considered the one quote-unquote above its orbital plane, Pluto's is based on its retrograde rotation, which was used to simplify the axial tilt definition for objects beyond Neptune. So anyway, Pluto's 4 other moons are much smaller than Charon. Styx and Hydra were discovered on June 15, 2005 by the Hubble Space Telescope. Styx was named after the goddess of the night and the mother of Charon. While in Greek, Styx is actually spelled with a Y, they spelled it with an I, which is the Egyptian spelling, because Styx was already the name of an asteroid. Hydra was named after the multi-headed serpent in Greek mythology. Now, the number of heads it actually has varies depending on the story, but it was often depicted with 9, which reflects Pluto's original status as the 9th planet. Styx and Hydra also have the initials NH as a reference to the New Horizons space probe that was to be sent to Pluto at the time. The 4th moon to be discovered, Kerberos, was discovered on June 28, 2011 by a team of American astronomers led by Mark R. Showalter. Kerberos was the 3-headed dog that guarded the underworld in Greek mythology. He was known to the Romans as Cerberus, which was originally going to be the name, but it was the name of an asteroid. And Kerberos was actually decided by an internet poll, which, like I said, I believe actually chose Cerberus. And finally, Styx was discovered on June 26th, 2012 by the same team led by Showalter. Yeah, all Pluto's moons were discovered in June. It was named after the river that flows through the underworld in Greek mythology and the goddess of it. And that name was also chosen by an internet poll. So anyway, looking at them more closely, I didn't put too much detail into them. They're small moons and we don't have particularly good pictures of them. Styx has an average diameter of about 11 kilometers. It is Pluto's smallest moon. Nix is Pluto's third largest moon at about 38 kilometers. Kerberos is the second smallest at 13 kilometers. And Hydra is the second largest after Charon at about 39 kilometers across. Now, like with Charon, the moon's orbits are all pretty much circular and aligned with Pluto's equator. Styx takes about 20 days to orbit at around 42,700 kilometers from the Plutonian barycenter. Nix at about 48,700 kilometers away takes about 25 days. Kerberos takes about 32 days at 57,800 kilometers. And Hydra at about 64,700 kilometers away takes about 38 days to orbit Pluto once. Now, these moons are believed to have some weak orbital resonances, but I don't believe any are completely uniform. And also, I did not have these moons rotate at all because, unlike Charon, they are not tidally locked to Pluto. In fact, due to the change in gravity with Pluto and Charon orbit each other, they tumble around chaotically. Their rotation is pretty much unpredictable. So that's it for Pluto's moons. I think it's time to move on to Pluto's orbit. Okay, so here we are back in the solar system with Pluto's orbit added in. Now, Pluto orbits the Sun in just under 248 years at an average distance of 5.9 billion kilometers, or about 39 astronomical units. However, Pluto's orbit is very eccentric. It can get as close to the Sun as 4.4 billion kilometers, or 30 astronomical units, and as far as 7.4 billion kilometers, or about 49 astronomical units. Now, if you look at it from above, you can see Neptune and Pluto's orbits appear to intersect. For 20 years at a time, Pluto is actually closer to the Sun than Neptune. However, as you can see with the way they're oriented, there's no chance of there being a collision. And in addition to that, they can't collide Because of Pluto's stable orbital resonance with Neptune. For every 3 orbits around the Sun Neptune makes, Pluto makes 2. As such, Pluto is always a fair distance ahead or behind Neptune in its orbit. And you can see we're at the same side of the Sun. Pluto is pretty far away. Got that 17-degree inclination with Pluto's orbit. And in fact, I believe Pluto is actually capable of getting closer to Uranus than it ever can to Neptune. Anyway, other objects in the Kuiper belt that share Pluto's orbital resonance with Neptune are called Plutinos. So let's get a glimpse of Pluto from Earth. Obviously, it's way too far away to be seen without the aid of any equipment. Let's see if we can zoom in far enough. And there we go, we've got Pluto and Charon. So, that's it for Pluto. Next time on the Blender Solar System, we're going to move on to even more dwarf planets. See you then.